the Desi States of America.
Hi, welcome back to Desi States of America. I am here at the Nassau Club in Princeton University to speak with Dobie Langencamp about the Iraq War. He was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Energy for the Carter and Clinton administrations, and he is currently a consultant in Iraqi oil and gas oil policies. Thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Dobie, may I call you Dobie?
Yes, certainly.
Well, let's start right off with the Iraq War, and I think the question that was on a lot of people's minds when we first went in 2003 was, are we going there for oil?
I think the answer to that is no, although the motivations of those who instigated this policy are somewhat clouded. But I think the fair answer to history is no, except in a very indirect way. I mean, certainly the significance of Iraq is the fact that it is in the midst of the Middle East, and this gives it a power and a influence that it would not normally have. On the other hand, as the public understands that issue, we didn't go in for oil.
I see. So where do you think that sentiment came from? There was a lot of talk about Vice President Cheney's involvement in Halliburton and us going in there. Where did that sentiment come from?
Well, if you look at what has actually happened in Iraq since we went in, it rebuts the proposition that we went in for oil. Now, under the Hague Convention and under the law of warfare, when you occupy a country, you're entitled to take its oil for the time you're the occupying power, if you use that oil and the money from the oil for the occupation. We were an occupying power formally for a year, and yet the United States took none of the oil. I mean, the oil was sold, such as it was, by the Iraqis themselves and put in a special account for them, which still exists, and the United States didn't take any of that oil, even though they had the right to do so under the Hague and Geneva Conventions. And then once the actual combat stopped, the United States didn't sell the oil. One of the functioning entities in Iraq at that time was SOMO, the Iraqi oil company, and they sold the oil, and they sold it to the highest bidder. Now, at first there wasn't very much oil because of the damage, but subsequently they got more and more. They're now selling about 2 million to 2.5 million barrels a day, and they're selling it on the open market by sealed bid to anybody that has the money. And that includes many of the opponents of the war. China, India, France, and so forth have been purchasing the oil.
So looking at the situation now, it seems pretty stupid of us to not have taken advantage of the oil reserves when we were there. Why do you think we didn't do that? I mean, you said the Geneva Convention gives us the right to just go in there and kind of do what we wanted.
Well, we had the absolute right for a year. Once Bremer left, then we were no longer formally an occupying power. I think it's fair to say, as Colin Powell says, we've never asked for, the United States has never asked for anything more than space to bury its dead. I mean, it may be foolish, and it surprises a lot of people, but that's the way it has worked out in Iraq. Now, unfortunately, the net effect of the war has been to devastate oil from the standpoint of world price. I mean, we took out of circulation for that period of time of the attack and years afterwards, we took out of circulation probably, if you aggregated it, probably 5 billion barrels of oil taken out of the world oil mix. And since oil is price is based on supply and demand, our attack on Iraq had the effect of driving up oil prices for probably this entire decade.
So it kind of had the opposite effect of what we were going in there to do.
Well, that's if you think that the objective was to decrease oil prices and get access to oil. I really do believe that the motivation of Cheney and Rumsfeld and so forth was highly motivated by the war on terrorism and weapons and the perception of weapons of mass destruction.
So you think they really did believe that they were weapons there?
Oh,
I think that Saddam Hussein was a real threat.
I think they did. Many of the moderate sources. There's a book by a fellow by the name of Pollock that was written about 3 months before the war and said, what are the arguments for going in? Well, he weighs all the arguments, pro and con, and when you get down to the bottom, the one argument that was hard to answer was weapons of mass destruction. And a lot of people concluded, and a lot of the Democrats concluded that there probably were, and that was a justification for the attack. It was wildly inaccurate.
Right. That just seems incredible to me that they
It's
were
incredible.
able to fool themselves into thinking that.
Well, it's one of
that
the
this is
one of the
situation.
dumbest moves that a country's ever taken, and
Right,
the result were hundreds of thousands of people
Yeah.
killed. I mean, if we have 4,000 Americans dead, but we have hundreds of thousands of Iraqis dead.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll go down in history as one of the greatest boo-boos. Now, there's an attempt now to try to justify it on other grounds. But you know, it goes down in history as one of the great
The whole
errors.
spread democracy.
Yeah, but I think there was
idea.
sincere. I think there was a lot of salesmanship involved, slightly deceitful salesmanship by the administration. But I think they actually believed in the weapons of mass destruction themselves, and I don't think they had any idea there were. And I don't think anyone in the world thought that Saddam was lying.
Right. So to quickly wrap up before we leave, you're here at Princeton to speak about the rethinking the U.S. Middle East policy from an energy standpoint. Real quick, could you provide some insight on that?
Well, I think the United States developed this very intrusive policy towards the Middle East with military bases all over the Middle East, huge appropriations to build up the power of Saudi Arabia and Iraq at one point. You don't get oil at the point of a bayonet, and for some reason our policymakers seem to think that having massive U.S. military power in the Middle East makes our energy supply more secure. The reality is it probably makes it less secure because we've created the terrorist movement in a lot of respects.
Right. So we've established the Iraq War was useless. We didn't get anything out of it, and it's actually made situations worse, pretty much for everybody.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, Dobie.
Okay, good.
Very
Thank you.
glad to have you on the show.
Yeah.
And stay tuned for more Desi States of America. We'll be right back after these messages.